The sky over Terra Nova shimmered with streaks of silver as the galactic overseers descended once more. Their ships, massive and sleek, hovered above the dusty human colony like silent judges. On the ground, people stopped their work, miners paused with tools in hand, farmers shielded their eyes from the sun, and children peeked from behind cracked doors. The overseers didn't visit often, but when they did, everyone knew the rule: stay quiet, bow your head, and don't make trouble. That's how it had been for generations, ever since humans settled this rocky world under the overseers' watchful gaze. Lila stood at the edge of the colony's repair yard, wiping grease from her hands. She was an engineer, one of the best, though no one outside Terra Nova would ever know it. Her dark hair was tied back, and her sharp eyes followed the overseer's ship as it landed with a low hum. She didn't bow her head like the others. Not because she was brave, at least, she didn't think so, but because she couldn't stop wondering what made those ships tick. The overseers called humans weak, primitive, barely worth their time. Yet their machines were flawless, and Lila wanted to know why they feared humans enough to keep them so small. The alien delegation stepped out, tall and thin with shimmering skin that changed color with the light. Their leader, a figure the humans called Blue because of its usual hue, raised a long arm. Its voice buzzed through a translator, flat and cold. Terra Nova has exceeded its resource quota. You will deliver double the ore by the next cycle, or your water rations will be cut. The crowd murmured, fear rippling through them. Double the ore. The mines were already crumbling, and the workers were exhausted. But no one spoke up. The overseers didn't like questions. Lila's fingers tightened around her wrench. She glanced at the old radio tower behind the yard, a relic from the colony's founding days. It hadn't worked in years, but lately, she'd heard something, faint static, a whisper of a signal. She hadn't told anyone yet, not even Milo, her friend who worked the mines. The overseer's rule was clear: no unauthorized tech, no digging into the past. But that signal gnawed at her, a puzzle she couldn't leave alone. Blue turned its faceless head toward her, and Lila quickly lowered her gaze. She felt it stare, heavy and searching, before it moved on. The overseers didn't stay long, just enough to remind everyone who was in charge, then their ship lifted off, vanishing into the sky. The colony breathed again, but the tension lingered. Double the ore. It was impossible, and everyone knew it. That night, Lila slipped into the repair shed, a dim shack filled with salvaged parts and flickering lights. She pulled out a small receiver she'd been tinkering with, patched together from scraps. The signal was still there, faint but steady, buried under layers of noise. She adjusted the dials, her heart pounding. This wasn't just random static, it had a pattern, like a message waiting to be heard. She leaned closer, whispering to herself, "What are you hiding?" The door creaked, and she jumped, shoving the receiver under a tarp. Milo stepped in, his broad shoulders dusted with mine dirt. He was older than her, with an easy grin that hid how tired he always was. "Working late again?" he asked, eyeing the mess of tools. Lila relaxed, brushing off her nerves. "Just fixing something." "How's the mine?" "Falling apart," Milo said, his grin fading. "Double the ore. They're trying to break us." He sat on a crate, running a hand through his messy hair. "People are scared, Lila. They won't say it, but they are." She hesitated, then pulled the receiver out. "Milo, listen to this." She turned it on, and the faint hum filled the shed. His eyes widened. "What is that?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "But it's not overseer tech, it's older, human. I think it's been here since the colony started." She looked at him, her voice dropping. "What if it's something they don't want us to find?" Milo stared at the device, then at her. "You're playing with fire, you know that, right? If they catch you." "They won't," she said, though she wasn't sure. "Not if we're careful." I need to know what this is, Milo. Don't you ever wonder why they're so afraid of us? He didn't answer right away. The overseers had always said humans were nothing, too weak to matter, too simple to fight. But Lila's question hung in the air, stirring something in him. Finally, he nodded. Okay. But we keep it quiet. Just us. Lila smiled, small but real. The signal pulsed in the background, a heartbeat from the past. Outside, Terra Nova slept under the overseer's shadow, but in that shed, something was waking up. The rule was to stay silent, to never push back. But rules, Lila thought, were only as strong as the people who followed them. And she was tired of bowing. The air in the repair shed felt thicker now, charged with the quiet hum of the receiver and the weight of what Lila and Milo had stumbled into. The colony outside was still, the night sky above Terra Nova dotted with stars that seemed impossibly far away. Lila sat cross-legged on the floor, tweaking the receiver's wires with a steady hand. Milo leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her work. The signal was clearer now, a rhythmic pulse, like a voice trying to break through. It wasn't overseer tech, it was human, and that alone made it dangerous. We need more power to crack it, Lila said, not looking up. This thing's old, probably buried in the colony's grid somewhere. If I can boost the signal, we might hear what it's saying. She glanced at Milo. You in? Milo rubbed the back of his neck, his easy grin nowhere in sight. You're asking me to sneak around behind the overseers' backs. If they find out, it's not just a slap on the wrist. They'll shut us down, maybe worse. He paused, then sighed. But yeah, I'm in. Been hauling ore for them too long to not wonder what's really going on. Lila's eyes lit up. Good. I'll need your help scavenging parts. The mines have old tech, stuff the overseers don't bother with. Think you can grab some without anyone noticing? Milo nodded. Miners lose tools all the time. I'll make it look like an accident. He pushed off the wall, already thinking. But we've got to be smart. They've been watching us closer since that quota demand. Patrols are up. He wasn't wrong. The overseers had left drones hovering over the colony, small, glowing orbs that buzzed through the streets, scanning everything. Lila had seen one linger near the repair yard that morning, its light flickering over her tools. She'd kept her head down, playing the part of the quiet worker, but it had rattled her. The overseers didn't trust humans, and that distrust was their leash. Over the next few days, they moved carefully. Milo slipped into the mines, pocketing bits of wiring in a cracked power cell no one would miss. Lila worked late, piecing together a crude amplifier in the shed. They didn't talk about it in the open, no whispers in the canteen, no notes left behind. The colony buzzed with its usual rhythm, clanging tools, weary voices, the groan of machinery. But beneath it, a spark was growing. One evening, Milo dropped a heavy satchel on the shed floor, dust puffing up around it. Got what I could, he said, wiping sweat from his brow. Nearly got caught when a drone swept the lower tunnels. Had to bury this under a rock pile till it passed. Lila grinned, pulling out the parts. You're a natural at this. She wired the power cell to the receiver, her fingers quick and sure. The hum grew louder, sharper, until a faint voice crackled through. It was garbled, broken by static, but unmistakably human, fleet, buried, strength. They froze, staring at the device. Fleet. Milo whispered. Like ships? Here. Lila's mind raced. Maybe. Terra Nova wasn't always a colony. The old stories say humans crashed here long before the overseers showed up. What if they left something behind, something big? Milo frowned. And the overseers don't know. They've got eyes everywhere. Maybe they do, Lila said. Maybe that's why they keep us quiet. They're afraid of what we might find. She turned the dial, but the signal cut out, leaving only silence. We need to dig deeper, literally. If there's a fleet buried here, it's in the ground somewhere. Milo laughed, short and nervous. You want to dig up the planet? With what? Our hands. Not the whole planet, she shot back. Just the right spot. The signal's got to have a source. We find it, we find answers. She looked at him, her voice steady. This could change everything, Milo. For all of us. He didn't argue. Something in her words, or maybe that faint voice from the past, stirred him. The next night, they slipped out of the colony, dodging the drone's faint glow. Milo led her to an abandoned mine shaft, its entrance half collapsed and forgotten. No one comes here, he said. If that signal's underground, this is as good a place as any. They worked in the dark, using a handheld scanner Lila had rigged from spare parts. The signal grew stronger as they descended, the air turning cold and stale. Hours passed, their breath fogging in the dim light, until the scanner beeped wildly. Lila knelt, brushing dirt from a metal panel buried in the rock. It was rusted, ancient, but etched with a faded human symbol, a star with wings. Milo, she breathed, this is it. She pried the panel open, revealing a tangle of wires and a blinking light. The signal poured out, clear now, fleet coordinates. Terra Nova, reclaim. Before they could process it, a shadow loomed overhead. An overseer drone hummed into the shaft, its light locking onto them. Milo yanked Lila back, shoving her behind a boulder as the drone's scanner swept the space. Stay down, he hissed, his heart pounding. The drone lingered, its buzz filling the tunnel, then drifted away, disappearing into the night. They waited, barely breathing, until silence returned. Lila clutched the scanner, her hands trembling. That was too close, Milo said, his voice low. They're on to us. Not yet, Lila replied, though her confidence wavered. But we can't stop now. This fleet, whatever it is, it's real. And it's ours. Milo looked at the panel, then at her. You're crazy, you know that. But if there's a chance this gets us out from under them, he trailed off, nodding. What's next? We build, Lila said. Something to track those coordinates. Something they won't see coming. She smiled, faint but fierce. The overseers wanted humans silent, submissive. But silence could hide a lot, like the whisper of defiance growing in that tunnel, ready to roar. The colony slept on, unaware of the two figures plotting in the dark. The overseers' drones patrolled above, certain of their control. But beneath their gaze, something shifted. Humans had bowed their heads for years, playing the part. Now, with a buried secret humming in their hands, they were starting to look up. The discovery in the abandoned mine shaft changed everything for Lila and Milo. The signal wasn't just a relic, it was a map, a lifeline to something humans had lost long ago. Back in the repair shed, Lila hunched over the metal panel they'd pried from the rock, her tools scattered around her. The coordinates pulsed through the scanner, pointing to a spot deep beneath Terra Nova's surface. Milo paced nearby, his boots scuffing the dirt floor. The air buzzed with possibility, but also danger. The overseer's drone had seen something, and they both knew time was running out. It's a fleet, Lila said, her voice firm despite the late hour. Ships, Milo. Human ships. Buried right under us. She tapped the scanner, showing a faint outline of structures, sleek hulls, engines, weapons. The overseers must have known. That's why they've kept us digging or instead of exploring. Milo stopped pacing, his jaw tight. If they find out we're onto this, they won't just cut water rations. They'll bury us with it. He met her gaze. You sure about this, Lila? Once we start, there's no going back. She didn't hesitate. I'm sure. We've been quiet too long. This is our chance, our strength. She stood, brushing dust from her hands. We need help, though. People we trust. Milo nodded slowly. I know a few. Miners mostly, tough folks who've grumbled about the overseers for years. They'll listen if we show them proof. He smirked, just a little. You've got a way of making crazy sound possible. By dawn, they'd gathered a small crew in the shed, 5 others, all weathered from years in the mines or fields. There was Tara, a wiry woman with sharp eyes who fixed machinery, Ben, a hulking miner with a quiet temper, and 3 others who'd spent their lives hauling ore for alien masters. Lila showed them the panel and played the signal, fleet coordinates, reclaim. Their faces shifted from doubt to wonder. You're saying we've got ships down there? Tara asked, leaning closer. Real ones? Real enough to scare the overseers, Lila replied. We dig them up, we turn this around. Ben crossed his arms. And if they catch us? Those drones aren't toys. Then we move fast, Milo said. We've got tools, we've got know-how. The overseers think we're too dumb to fight. Let's prove them wrong. The group agreed, a quiet pact forming among them. They split tasks. Milo and Ben would lead the dig in the old shaft, using mining gear to mask their work as routine repairs. Tara and the others would scavenge parts to keep the colony's machines running. No one could suspect a thing. Lila would decode the signal fully, pinpointing the fleet's exact spot. They worked in shifts, stealing hours between overseer patrols, their secret growing with every spadeful of dirt. Days later, they hit metal. Deep in the shaft, Milo's drill sparked against something solid, smooth, curved, and massive. He called Lila down, and she slid into the tunnel, her breath catching. It was a ship's hull, gleaming faintly under centuries of rock. She ran her hand over it, feeling the hum of dormant power. This is it, she whispered. We found them. The crew dug faster, uncovering a hangar-sized chamber. 3 ships rested there, their designs sharp and alien to the overseer's curves, human-made, built for speed and fight. Lila climbed aboard the first, its cockpit lighting up at her touch. Screens flickered, showing systems still alive after all this time. They're intact, she called out. We can use these. But their luck ran dry. Above, a low rumble shook the ground. Overseer drones swarmed the colony, their lights piercing the dawn. Blue's ship descended, flanked by enforcers, taller, armored figures with weapons that glowed red. The humans froze as Blue's voice echoed over the comms, unauthorized activity detected. Cease immediately or face correction. Milo grabbed Lila's arm. They know. We've got to move now. She nodded, her mind racing. Get everyone to the ships. We'll hold them off. The crew scrambled, piling into the lead ship as Lila powered it up. The engines roared, shaking dust from the walls. Outside, enforcers marched toward the shaft, their weapons humming. The ship lurched free, bursting from the tunnel in a spray of rock. Lila gripped the controls, Milo beside her shouting directions. The overseers fired, beams scorching the hull, but the ship held, its shields flaring to life. These things are tough. Tara yelled from the back, amazement in her voice. Lila swerved, dodging another blast, and aimed the ship's cannons, simple but deadly. She fired, and a drone exploded in midair, raining sparks over the colony. The enforcers scattered, unused to resistance. Below, people ran from their homes, staring up in awe. Humans fighting back, it was unthinkable. Blue's ship loomed closer, its voice cutting through, submit, or be erased. Lila didn't flinch. She banked the ship hard, landing a hit on an enforcer squad. The crew cheered as the aliens retreated, but it was only a pause. More overseer ships gathered in the sky, a dark promise of what was coming. Back in the hangar, they powered up the second ship. Ben took its helm, grinning despite the chaos. "Never thought I'd fly," he said, lifting off to join Lila. The third ship stayed dark, too damaged to move yet, but two were enough for now. The colony buzzed below, whispers turning to shouts. People grabbed tools, makeshift weapons, anything they could find. The fire was spreading. Lila looked at Milo, sweat streaking her face. "This is just the start. They'll hit back harder." "Let them," he said, fierce now. "We've got something they don't, us." He clapped her shoulder. "Keep flying. Show them what humans can do." The ships rose together, facing the Overseer fleet. The drones regrouped, enforcers massing below. Blue's voice returned, colder, "You will regret this." But Lila smiled, small and defiant. The Overseers had wanted silence. Instead, they'd woken a storm. Terra Nova wasn't theirs anymore, it was human, and it was fighting. The sky above Terra Nova burned with streaks of light as Overseer ships closed in. Lila piloted the lead ship, her hands steady on the controls despite the chaos. Beside her, Milo tracked the enemy movements, calling out targets. The second ship, flown by Ben, flanked them, its cannons blazing. Below, the colony glowed with defiance, people no longer cowered but stood together, watching their kin take the fight to the stars. The Overseers had ruled through fear, demanding silence. Now, that silence was gone, replaced by the roar of engines and the will to be free. The fleet they'd uncovered wasn't perfect, 2 ships flew, but the third remained grounded, its hull cracked from centuries underground. Still, those 2 were marvels, fast, tough, and armed with weapons that hummed with forgotten human grit. Lila marveled at them even as she dodged a barrage from an Overseer drone. "Who built these?" she muttered, banking hard to avoid a glowing beam. "People like us," Milo said, his voice tight but sure. "People who didn't bow." He pointed at the screen. 3 more coming from the east, big ones. Lila nodded, her mind racing. The Overseers outnumbered them, their ships sleek and bristling with tech. But humans had something else, instinct, desperation, and a knack for turning scraps into miracles. She opened a comm to Ben. "Stay close. We hit them together, fast and hard." "Got it," Ben's voice crackled back. "Let's make them run." The battle erupted in earnest. Overseer ships fired volleys of red energy, searing the air. Lila wove through the onslaught, her ship's shields flaring under each hit. She returned fire, targeting a drone's core, its weak spot, she'd guessed from watching them patrol. It exploded in a shower of sparks, and Milo whooped. "Nice shot." Ben followed, taking out another. The Overseers faltered, unused to resistance. Their leader, Blue, emerged in the largest ship, its hull shimmering with menace. Its voice boomed over the comms, "You defy us at your peril. Surrender, and mercy may be granted." Lila smirked. "Mercy's what you give when you're scared." She cut the comm and pushed the ship forward, straight at Blue's vessel. Milo gripped his seat. "What are you doing?" "Trust me," she said. At the last second, she pulled up, skimming over Blue's ship. Ben mirrored her, crossing underneath. Their cannons fired in unison, hammering the Overseer's shields. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, and it lurched, off balance. The crew back in the hold, Terra and the others, worked fast, rerouting power to keep the engines alive. "Shields are at half." Terra shouted. "Don't get cocky." Too late for that, Milo shot back, grinning despite the odds. The Overseers regrouped, their drones forming a tight net. Blue's ship recovered, firing a beam that grazed Lila's wing. The ship shuddered, alarms blaring, but she held course. "We've got to break them now," she said. "Or they'll crush us." Milo scanned the controls, then pointed. There, auxiliary thrusters. Old trick from the mines, overload them for a burst of speed. Lila didn't hesitate. She flipped the switch, and the ship surged forward, slamming into a cluster of drones. They scattered like startled birds, two crashing into each other. Ben followed her lead, carving a path through the chaos. Below, the colony fought too. Miners lobbed rocks at enforcers, farmers rigged traps from irrigation pipes. It wasn't much, but it slowed the ground forces, buying Lila time. She glanced at the scanner, the coordinates from the signal still glowed, marking the buried fleet. If we can get that third ship up, she said, we turn this around. Milo shook his head. No time. We finish this with what we've got. He was right. The overseers pressed harder, their numbers overwhelming. Blue's ship loomed again, its weapons charging for a killing blow. Lila's heart pounded, but her mind stayed sharp. She remembered the signal's words, reclaim. This wasn't just about surviving, it was about proving humans belonged here, in the stars. Ben, she called, one more run. Full power, right at Blue. We've got one shot. Ben's laugh came through the comms. Crazy works for me. The two ships aligned, engines roaring as they charged. The overseers fired, beams scorching their hulls, but Lila didn't flinch. She aimed for Blue's bridge, cannons blazing. Ben hit the engines, a double strike that lit the sky. Blue's shields collapsed, its ship spinning out of control. It crashed into a drone swarm, the explosion rippling outward, swallowing half the overseer fleet. Silence followed, broken only by the hum of their battered ships. The remaining overseers hesitated, then fled, their silver streaks vanishing into the void. Blue's voice didn't return. Lila eased back, her hands trembling now that the fight was done. Milo slumped in his seat, exhaling. We did it. Not yet, she said, turning the ship toward Terra Nova. Below, people cheered, their voices rising like a tide. The enforcers retreated, chased off by a mob armed with little more than courage. The colony was free, for now. They landed near the hangar, stepping out to a crowd that parted in awe. Terra ran up, clapping Lila's shoulder. You're insane, and I love it. Ben joined them, his grin wide. Told you crazy works. Lila looked at the buried fleet, its third ship still dark but waiting. This isn't the end, she said. They'll come back. But next time, we'll be ready. She turned to the stars, their light no longer distant but calling. These belong to us now. Milo stood beside her, nodding. No more bowing. No more silence. The crowd murmured agreement, their fear replaced by fire. The overseers had underestimated humans, thinking them weak, easily controlled. But humans didn't just endure, they built, they fought, they reclaimed. Terra Nova was just the start. As night fell, Lila climbed aboard the lead ship again, running her hand over its controls. The signal's echo lingered in her mind, reclaim. She smiled, fierce and free. The galaxy wasn't ready for what humans could do when they stopped playing quiet. And she couldn't wait to show it.